Hello and welcome to episode 7 of The Business of the Starving Artist with Hayden Woods, where we get you from being a starving artist to a surviving, if not thriving artist. I'm sorry. I'm laughing because I've recorded this episode a few times, and throughout the episode I've been trying to restructure how I think about this, and when I finally got to the end of this, I kind of have to laugh about the final result. So let's just get into it. As a disclaimer, the first one is I'm a musician and a music educator, so a lot of the experience that I have revolves around that industry, but there are many lessons that we can take and provide to the other areas of the creative arts / self-employment. The second disclaimer, as we can see by this first screenshot, is we're dealing with debt. And I am not your financial planner. I am somebody who royally screwed up his own credit to try to get this business off the ground. And since then, luckily, have settled it. But looking at the numbers, we're going to find out how much that truly helped, if it did. The title of this episode is Butchered Credit and the Climb Out. And we have to start back in 2019. January to be specific. This was the lowest point in my life. Lot going wrong, mentally not doing well, financially doing even worse, and accumulating a mid 10,000s worth of credit card debt to pay for things like food and gas and the power bill and the internet bill and all those fun things. So through all that and through the impossible expectations that I had set for myself, I landed in a very tight spot. And financially, because of that, it cost me mentally as well. So after quitting drinking, after getting on some medication, after going to therapy, the next step that I had to take was getting this debt under control. As the visual listeners or seers can see, 3 credit cards ended up in this program. Now, there was technically 4 credit cards that I had to deal with, but one of them was only for 400 something bucks. So I dealt with it myself. I dealt with paying $10 a month through an agreement with the credit company. This was like a store card for a music website, and I was able to get that paid off quickly. But this 5-digit debt, on the other hand, was going to take some more work. At least in my head, that's what my thought was. So how do we go about this? There are a few things you can do. You can consolidate these debts into one singular payment, hoping that it's a lower interest, lower monthly, and get yourself back on top. I needed a faster solution in my mind. And for me, that was debt settlement debt settlement company. For the purposes of this video, I am not going to be saying any of the company names. I'm going to try to edit out where I can the names of the credit cards. I might just show the little colors off to the left for the visual folks, but otherwise we're just looking at the figures that are given. We see a few numbers. We see the enrolled debt, $16,774. We see an adjusted debt, which we'll get to in a little bit, and then we'll see how much it resolved for. Let's just jump right into each of the debts. The first one was the easiest one to settle. All of the debts were enrolled in this program in May of 2019. And the idea is that I would make monthly payments to this debt settlement company, which would then put money aside for the purposes of getting this debt settled. Through fees and other things, we'll kind of see how they had to structure it, but you can kind of see why they had to do it with this first one. It took about 9 months to get a payment plan and an offer established to this first debtor. The original debt was for $6,139, but the debt settlement company was able to extend an offer of $3,380. Once that was accepted, the debt was adjusted to show the true balance at the time of settlement, which was $7,510.91. The payment structure kind of stepped up over time. So for the first, 6 payments, I had to make $50, or the account that the money went to made a $50 monthly payment. Again, this is all separate outside of my reach so that I don't touch it, so that it only goes to the debt. After those 6 months, the payment went up to $125. And we'll kind of see that with how the fees changed over time or completed themselves over time. After 6 more months, it went up to $175 a month. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. After 6 more months of that, it went to $200 for 5, and then a final payment of $280 was made. And that settled the first debt in January of 2022. So from start to finish, May 19, January, about 2 years plus a few months to get this paid off. But keep in mind, the other debts were also being negotiated at the same time. Or at least that's what I thought. Because with debt 2, the complete opposite happened. Before we even get into how it got settled, we need to explain the process of settling a debt, at least from how I understood it. Obviously, when you default or you quit making payments, the money ends up going to either they try to collect it at the creditor or the debt owner, or it gets moved to a creditor or collector. Sorry. I'm getting my words mixed up today. As a result of that, then they try to go after you a little bit more aggressively. And usually that process means you're going to get served to go to court. That happened with this one. I got served and I sent it to this debt settlement team, who then sent it to a legal representative in my state. I'm going to leave their name out because, unfortunately, they could have done a lot more and they could have done a lot better for me. Anyway, so they went and they presented a few offers to me on how to settle this. I picked an offer. I picked one, and they were supposed to act on it. They didn't act on it. And one day, while I'm sitting at my substitute teaching job, that was my supplemental, which worked out because it's more in my field. I'm sitting there looking at my bank account because the rent's due, and I'm looking to see if the money had come out. Some money came out, but it wasn't the rent money. What ended up happening, and I found out about this a day or two later, is that the debt owner sent a bank levy to my bank account and pulled almost $2,500 out. Again, not all that was my money. That was rent money. So that was roommates as well. And while I was able to sell some of my investment stuff that I had in order to cover myself, it wasn't very nice. So once I found out about this transaction, I immediately called the debt company and be like, hey, something happened. I've now been bank levied. Here's how much they took out. And they said, okay, we'll get this to the top of our priority and get this figured out. Because it sounds like they were getting close to something, but they needed to move fast. And they did. And they made an offer of $2,600. Now, keep in mind, again, the company already took, not the debt company, but the one that owned the second debt, took almost $2,500 out. So we settled for $2,600. And a little bit later, I wasn't sure. I had to think about this for a little while, but I received a check in the mail from this company for essentially the amount they took out of my bank account. So what I did with that money is I went and opened a new bank account that was separate and that was new so that they couldn't find it if something happened with the third debt. Because you have to notify of things that are happening. And when you're not notified of that, who's supposed to try and get this figured out? But silver lining, it got settled. And I got my money back from the bank account. The third debt was easier. It was just like the first one as far as setting up a payment plan, but this one was consistent because this was the final debt to figure out. On April, we took a settlement offer of $3,332 and accepted that with payments of $476.08. The original debt was $5,520, and the adjusted was $6,665.11. And we'll go over these numbers more in detail when we summarize. On this screenshot, it says that the payment plan was active because I took the screenshot basically days before the final payment went out. And with that, the settlements were made, and I was debt-free once again. Other than my student loans, but, that's what a payment plan is for. Anyway, so we look at all this, and we see, if I go back to the beginning, we see how much I had to pay essentially each month, which is about $160, $263, because I split my monthly payment into two smaller ones so I could brace for impact a little bit easier. We see that enrolled debt, but then there's the adjusted debt, which is how much each balance became by the time we made an offer or an approved offer. And then the resolved debt is how much each of those settlement amounts were for in the end. So if we look, and I kind of prepped this ahead of time, Ken recorded a few of these, we have to consider the adjusted debts and how much we saved in figuring out how this all works. And there's several steps to this. And by the end, I think you'll kind of see why I was laughing and kind of have my final thoughts on it. So starting debt, $16,774. The adjusted debt was $2,732.39, which meant that we added an almost extra $4,000 of debt by just letting it sit there. We resolved it for $14,067.28. So if I figure how much I wanted to save, if I think about the original debt and the resolved debt, it shows that I basically saved $2,706.72. Not bad. If we think about the adjusted debt, it looks a lot better, right? It shows that we saved $6,665.11, which percentage-wise is about 32%. The OG saved was 16%, and we basically added 23% to the amount of debt. So at this first glance, it looks really good. Like, regardless of what you think or what you see, because even $2,700 is a good chunk of change for especially for a self-employed creative individual. But there are other fees, and I'm going to go over each of those. I'm using the payment schedule that they provided for me, which was nice of them because then I could kind of see what the timeline was, and we hit that one right on the mark. The first fee is the retainer fee. So getting lawyers and getting on that schedule. Each one, or that total out to $995. Now this was all paid within the first 10 months of this debt repayment program. But what that means is, with this and all the other fees, that the more fees you have, the less that goes into the settlement reserves. And of the, I think I calculated $340 a month that was being paid in total, maybe $40 a month was going to the settlement reserves for the first 10 months, which showing that first debt is why they had to structure it with a low payment first and then step it up as some more of these debts kind of resolve themselves. This one resolved in March 2nd of 2020. And then 2 weeks later, all broke loose. Which I guess was nice because during this whole process, if I wanted to, and I did, you could make extra payments. You could throw extra money into the account to kind of help with that. And I didn't really account for that now that I'm thinking about it, but we'll kind of see where that leads to in the end. The next cost that we have to think about is the service cost, like all the people that are working on this outside of like the legal team. So that cost about $3,392.35, split up in the monthly payments of around $160, $161. again, ish. This one resolved or finished up in February of 2021. So about 11 months after the retainer fee was completed. And by this time, about 130 of the 300 plus that I was making or putting in every month was going to the settlement reserves. These are the two fees that kind of go away over time, but the next two happened throughout the entire course of the program. So the legal administration fee was $2,282.50, basically $55 a month. I had written down other amounts, but then I remembered that I have to consider that my last payment schedule didn't go through because I had completed the program. And in fact, money was coming back, but I'll get to that. So this is how much legal admin was spent. The banking fee was how much the account cost to have, because again, this was a separate bank account outside of my reach. All I could do is give money to the settlement team. That money would then move into here, and then from there they would make the various payments. And the banking fee was $10.95 a month for the course of the whole program, and it ended up costing $459. So there's all those fees. And again, on a monthly draft of about 320, 340 bucks, beginning was slow because that's kind of how it is. But once that was, each of those first two was taken care of, it became easier to make those settlements. By the time I was done with this program, I was able to get back from this bank account $624.74. So a few months payments worth returned to me, which is nice. So with all of that in mind, what do we think we actually saved? Because again, the first part looks good up here, but then you have to take into account all of these extra fees down here. So, and that. Let's go through this together. The amount settled, so this is how much I paid, $14,067.28. The retainer fee of $995, the settlement or service cost, of over $3,000, the legal admin fee of almost $2,300, the bank fee of $459, and then how much I returned, led to this all costing $20,571.39. And actually, I should put a minus on that one. Let's see. Let's do that. There we go. So if I base it on the debt start, I lost money on this. If I go on the adjusted debt, the amount that it was at by the time I finished this program, I saved $161. And this is why I'm laughing, because it basically meant to me, maybe I should have just made the monthly payments. Maybe I should have just figured this out on my own. But when you have a lot of other things going on, like mental issues and trying to get your life sorted out, you don't have that kind of time. You want to focus your attention on getting the business built up for that. So perhaps this was something, I would consider this my hardest lesson financially. Bless you, cat. My cat's having an asthma attack. Anyway, I would say that, again, if you have a lower amount that you're trying to get out of debt with and you're struggling, if it's like a low to mid 4-digit number, you might be able to get it done yourself. You might be able to call, like if you stop, again, I stopped making payments on all those credits, so that makes it a little bit difficult. If you call them and be like, hey, I am struggling, I need to settle this, and probably close the account. If you're having to settle, you're going to close your account. Like, I don't have those 3 cards anymore. And they were nice cards, and it sucks. But I have new nice cards that I haven't butchered. So it worked out in the end. I would like to hope I've learned my lesson, but, it's there's still a lot of life left to make lovely mistakes and hopefully non-financial blunders. Anyway, if you can do that yourself, that probably would be best for you. But if you have a significant amount of debt, again, 5 digits worth of debt, it might be in your interest to have somebody help you through this. Now, again, I'm not a financial advisor, so this is definitely something where you would have to talk to someone about this, because everyone's situation is a little bit different. Everyone's financial capabilities would be a little bit different as well. Like, because I had the side job while I was trying to figure out my own life, that helped get the ball rolling. 2020 happened, which meant a lot of unemployment. Definitely helped with that. Helped me be able to put money into that, be able to put money aside in savings, be able to invest some money. And now soon I'm moving a good chunk of that invested money into an IRA account so that it can just do its thing. Feels good. But you kind of have to figure out what you want to do for that. For example, my sister's working on figuring out a debt from a university. And I basically said, okay, if this is the only debt, maybe save up a good chunk of change and then find the creditor who has it, because apparently it's been traded around a few times. Find the creditor, give them a call. Don't tell them how much you have and see what they'll settle for. It never hurts to ask for help, financially or mentally. But in this case, financially, because whatever you can do to kind of help make sure things are going back on track, the better. At this point in my life, in my financial world, again, I've got some money put away in savings now. Didn't have a savings before the pandemic, so thanks, unemployment. Didn't have investments figured out, and now I'm transitioning into having a majority of that being held in an IRA account for retirement down the road, which, hooray, investing, good, future planning. The student loan debt is manageable right now just because, one, it's a lower interest rate debt, but also getting on one of those repayment plans is helping me be able to kind of plot out how I'm going to tackle this. Actually, hold on. If I want to talk, you know what? I'm going to talk about this debt too. So let's go ahead and we're going to get rid of all the notes that I just made, and we're going to start over. And we're going to talk about the college debt that I have and my plan to tackle it. Student loan debt. Wasn't planning on this section, but you know what? I'm going to just take every chance I can to make this as easy as possible. Because again, this is still technically a debt and I'm still strapped with it. I want to say I have $20,789, and I want to say that's how much I have. That's the dollar amount's correct. I don't know about the cents. Anyway, if I wanted to repay this debt on a non-income driven, because I can take all these tax deductions that I kind of mentioned earlier, it allows me to show that I'm spending money to make money, which then takes down my net profit. But either way, if I were to pay this monthly without that, I would have to pay $270.07. But because I'm on the new save program, my monthly payment right now is $0. So I might as well take that money and put it somewhere else. And what I've noticed with this program is I believe that the interest is no longer accruing because of this new program, so that you can actually try to get out of this debt rather than kind of get buried by making these payments, then still having more of it show up. If I look at my interest rates, they kind of vary. The lowest one is the 3.15%, and the highest one is 6.55. So, and what I've done, and I'll just kind of show this briefly, is I've taken these and I've organized them on both like the percentage of interest rate, but also how much each of these loans has. All of these loans came from the university side, not from the community college side. Community college I was debt free on that one. But when I went to the university, I had to get student loans to be able to make it out. And that's where a lot of people get burnt, is on not having those financial resources. Anyway, what I've determined is that I have a payoff order that I would like to tackle this with over time. A lot of it is based on the percentage. So my most recent student loans from when I returned to college to finish up were the higher interest rates ones, or they were actually the middle ground ones, but they're the ones that have the most balance on them. And as a result, those ones are affecting me the most right now, because it also means that those are the most recent loans to affect my credit, because it lowers the age average. So if I pay those off first, those would work. And then from there, I'm tackling the unsubsidized versus subsidized, just because the unsubsidized ones had, one, accumulated for longer, but also had at that point in time a higher interest rate than the subsidized loan. So I've got that plan in place so I can figure out when I have like a windfall, how I'm going to tackle that. Now, because I'm making a $0 a month payment and the interest isn't going up yet, I am going to take a good chunk of money, my income, and put it towards investing in either the retirement account or in the business first, and then going there. But I am not you. You are not me. Find a financial planner for yourself, or do your due diligence. Listening to me is not due diligence. Researching your specific situation is your due diligence. Figuring out, again, how much you have and how you want to approach it is your due diligence. Not listening to some rando on YouTube and now Spotify, hooray, on how to deal with this. So we want to be careful. But that's basically my debt story on how I buried myself and somehow unburied myself on the credit card side, and am able to start thinking about how do I tackle this one now, so that maybe one day I can afford a house. Probably not in the area where I live, because until it crashes, it's basically unaffordable to buy a house right now. Anyway, thank you for listening to The Business of the Starving Artist with Hayden Woods. As always, any likes, shares, all that generalized stuff that we're supposed to tell you to do, I don't like doing it that often. I will promote my tip jar. If you Venmo at Hayden-Woods-Music, make sure that each of those are capitalized. Any bit helps. Gas is still expensive. It's going down. It's nice, but it's still expensive to drive to every single one of these lessons. And I mean, until I'm at a point where it makes sense to have an electric vehicle, like when I'm not living in a state where it goes from 70 degrees to 7 in a day, I gotta do what I can. So any bit helps. Even just sharing or talking about this episode or this podcast is always a help. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time.